Meantime, we are seeing both sides of politics starting to move towards net zero climate emissions when it comes to 2050. Now, as you know, this is ridiculous because China is allowed to keep doubling the amount that they put in the world until 2030, and then they don't even get to net zero till 2060, 10 years after countries like ours are supposed to ruin the working class. Joe Biden is going to call leaders of most of the major nations, including Australia, to a giant Zoom call this week to make us decide what our position is going to be when it comes to either net zero or even more aggressive action. And the Department of State, their version of the Foreign Minister, is out there today suggesting that the United States will speak as loudly about failures to act on climate as they do about human rights. Now, of course, they're silent about human rights in China and they're silent about pollution in China, but they'll point the finger at places like little old Australia when the actual pollution that will continue to double and double and double till 2030, let alone be able to taper off till 2060, we're all going to have to sign up to this. And last night, the Prime Minister addressed a collection of business leaders in Sydney, and this was his crab walk towards net zero 2050. But the way he'll get there is not with a carbon tax.
We're not going to achieve net zero in the cafes, dinner parties and wine bars of our inner cities. It will not be achieved by taxing our industries that provide livelihoods for millions of Australians off the planet, as our political opponents sought to do when they got the chance.
Instead, the Labor Party, who want to get to net zero but won't tell us anything about 2030 when it comes to Paris, they will be putting a price on carbon. Now, this is very rarely spoken about, but it is the policy that has remained from the failed policies of the 2019 election and the 2016 election. Now, whether this will be a floating price on carbon or a fixed price on carbon is irrelevant. They are promising that they will put a price on carbon. This is going to be one of the great battle lines of the next election. But this battle, if both of you have the same outcome, is going to be one that's going to be difficult to sell to normal people. But Each Way Albo, who simultaneously is sending ministers out to say, "We love coal," is also saying this. Funnily enough, there's no video, so all I can do is read you part of his speech where he says, "I'm talking about a revolution in jobs right across the Australian economy based on one inescapable fact. Renewable energy is not only clean but cheap and getting cheaper," he said. We'll talk about this again with Mark Latham and Nicholas Rees because you know and I know that firstly, it is not as reliable. There is no system in the world that is as reliable as what currently exists. Now, the fingers crossed, let's see what happens into the future, also ignores that there is tens of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure costs that need to be made to put the windmills everywhere. But where will they go? None of them will be in the electorate of Marrickville. None will be in the electorate of Cook. Instead, they will be placed, of course, on the extreme fringes, or most likely all over regional Australia. The same with the solar farms. Is Zali Steggall planning to put any of those around her electorate? No. But if you live on the outskirts of town or in regional Australia, you should do it so she can feel better. But remember, this is the Sheila who promised she was getting an electric car but couldn't buy one because her kids were too big. So what always ends up happening is that you get the people who run the show, who talk the talk, and you're the one who has to walk the walk. But sadly, the walk is backwards. You know it, I know it. And even John Kerry knows it. Now, John Kerry has been put in as the climate czar on the behalf of the Biden administration. He effectively has the powers of a foreign minister to travel around the world in a private jet. I know, but he's important. To tell us that we all have to make greater efforts when it comes to climate. Well, you see, you don't hear much of John Kerry because when he actually speaks into a microphone, he makes a dick of himself, including the first time he spoke into a microphone at the White House after getting his new job. Now remember, this is the bloke who is telling us we have to pull our heads in when he admits this about turning everything off in the United States.
We could go to zero tomorrow and the problem isn't solved.
There you go. Zero tomorrow and nothing solved, but zero in 2050 is? Now, this is either politicians who are going to pretend that there's a solution, but they're not actually going to have to be accountable for it. Because as I've told you before, there is going to be federal elections, not just in 2022, but 2025, 2028, 2031, 2034, 2037. 2040, 2043, 46 and 49 before we get to 2050. So anyone making every promise now, they can make them because they won't have to be held accountable. But the problem with the deal is that if you have people like the United States and China who'll say, yes, let's agree to the finish line, but we'll ride you like it's the last couple of metres of the race in the first couple of years, then it means we're going to, of course, have to sacrifice the 21st century so these people who've lined their pockets for an awfully long time and those who plan to line them even more into the 21st century on technology that will cost tens of billions of dollars to make. And as the CSIRO reported, I'm not joking, it would cost us $1 trillion to establish a fully functioning electricity grid that was all about renewables. $1 trillion. Albo agreed to that in an interview on the ABC a couple of years ago. But who cares, right? Well, you care. I care because you know what the consequences are. You know what the opportunity cost is. But for politicians who don't really have to be held accountable until that many elections away, are they really going to sign off on this stuff? We'll find out in the next couple of days.